want to welcome everybody here. It's great to see some out to help us celebrate 100 years in this building. And it's the first of several programs this year that we're offering to remember our heritage. Since we call it the Tualatin Heritage Center, we needed to have a reason to get together. And behind me is a photo that you're going to hear more about it, because we have, well, at least 2 or 3 people who are in that picture, right? No, not really. That was 1926. No one in here today was there then, but I know you knew some people in that picture.
Oh, yes, I did.
Right. So.
My great aunt Rose Jurgens Castillo was right up at the top, and she was president of the Lady Day Society for 35 years.
Great memories. That's what we're sharing during this year. And another thing we're going to do today is recognize a very special person in our crowd. And this young lady has been on our board of the society for quite a while. She served in other roles, but she was treasurer for a while. And when we honored our 4th graders with a series of activities, several years, organized by Chris Tunstall, she was out there helping the kids learn about life here in Tualatin before electricity. And now she's still on our board, but she's moved into a new role on our board as board member emeritus. So what I want to do is recognize Barb Stinger. Come up, Barb. Our vice president. Our Vice President, April Wicker, on your left, is going to present Barb a recognition of her role, and it's a cutout picture of her talking about her experiences, in this case, on the Oregon Trail. Barb walked the entire trail from Baker over here in 1959 in the Oregon Centennial year. She was with a group in a wagon, and they came across. So we haven't done that with the 4th graders today, but we are recognizing her role. She was a teacher in the Hillsborough School District for a long time.
That really looks like me. Thank you very much.
So we wanted to give Barb a special recognition because she's been a great part of our society for a long time. And so now we're going to move into the why we're here. Like I mentioned, we're celebrating 2026, what happened here in 1926, not too far away, over on Boones Ferry Road today. And that was the first time this building was used in this picture you saw a minute ago with folks in front. The building itself is very interesting, and we're going to learn why it is so. And we're going to hear some stories about all of that next month in May, when memories are shared of what happened in this building over those decades. And so now we're going to look at what we mean by the type of architecture. So we're going to move ahead of that a little bit. This is built in what was called the craftsman style architecture. And so when I was getting ready for this program, I decided to call some local architects to see what is that. Nobody knew. They couldn't quite define what the craftsman style meant. But thanks to April again, there's a book that's out, and it's very heavy, but it's on buildings of Portland, mostly houses, and it's full of information. You can come look at it later, but thanks to April, we know what it looks like and why it was built that way and how they did it in those days. But we couldn't have done all of this work with this architecture, whatever it was, without the help of the city of Tualatin. And that is another part of this story. You saw that sign as you came in. Tualatin Heritage Center, a partnership between the city of Tualatin and the Historical Society. And that's the reason we're here today, because we were able to save the building, move it, transform it into something new. And now today, another 100 years later, we're still updating with remodeling going on in the office area here, outside, new cabinetry, bookshelves. So this is another evolution of the building. But let's go back and just look. When we were trying to save the building, one of our former presidents named John Bowles built a replica of it, scale model, that we took out around town to petition and get interest in the public in saving the building. Going to learn more about that in August when Paul Hennon is here today, who helped do that. Very much part of that story. So that's coming up in August. So next month, the memories of the building, and August, the move and the transformation. But first, let's look at what does craftsman style mean. First, it came after one or two other churches. There were two prior churches that burned down before this building was built. Well, both early churches were burned, right? The first two were burned, from what the records show. In 1925, that last church was a Methodist church, and in 1 year, they built this one with community volunteers all working to make it happen. And so some of the characteristics of craftsman style architecture are these. And I want you to just look at the model as we talk about that. You're going to see some pictures of houses in Tualatin that were also built in that style. Most often they had steep roofs, and they had eaves that stuck out more often in the houses a little further out. They had steps, 6 steps going into the building. And there were 6 steps when we moved this building. And some of the houses you're going to see in a minute also have that. They had, inside, they had lath and plaster walls. And that's what these are, lath and plaster, not the drywall that your house has today. A whole different style of making walls in those days. They had wonderful polished wood floors in those houses. Today, you're only going to be able to see it in Rick's office over here. You'll see the wood as it looked in this building then, and now it's covered with carpet, but that's the way they did it then. The wood baseboards are another characteristic of craftsman style. So you see the tall wood baseboards, and the staircases going up. You would turn around over a landing and then go up another turn to go up. You're going to hear about that in a little bit as well. And those stairways, by the way, never met the code then, and they didn't meet it when we got the building now. And that's why we don't allow you to go upstairs now, because it's very different from your house if you have stairs. So that's another characteristic. But I always thought craftsman style architecture meant it was very well built. Well, it was. In those days, the lumber was different from mostly what we get today. Very different, not full of knots, and they didn't go to Home Depot to get it. And they built it so strong that it was able to move here all in one piece. We didn't have any problems at that score, and we'll learn more about how the move was made in August, because we're going to have the moving company who did it. Not only our building, but the old brick store. Brick moved 30 feet back. So that's another part of the story you'll hear then. So those are some of the elements of craftsman style architecture. It was important then in the late 1800s all the way up to the 1930s. And again, architects then knew what it was. Today, they didn't know what I was talking about. So let's move ahead. Here are some of the houses around town today, still standing. Now, Mr. Sherburne, Charles Sherburne, was quite a craftsman apparently. He was involved with many of these houses and this church. He was not an architect, but he was a master craftsman. In other words, he could do anything building-wise. And I don't know that he had anything to do with that pulpit over there, but that was the pulpit in the church then, 1926. You see that wooden pulpit? That was also done by woodworking hobbyist people, farmers in this town. Remember, Tualatin then was farms. And so they did the work building the building and doing all the furniture, the pews, altar, pulpit, all done by hand by people who lived here. So the Sherburne House is one of those that's still standing. He was a carpenter, like I said. The Logan House on Logan Lane is still there today, and it's surrounded by modern houses. So you have to sort of look, when you're looking for it, you'll find it. And it's built by the station master of the Oregon Electric Railroad, who wanted that house built so he could watch the Oregon Electric train come down the tracks. And so it was sort of angled so that he could see that. And he rented rooms to school teachers in that house. So that's just an aside story. By the way, all of these houses, or several of them, are in our walking map of historic houses and buildings in the city, which you can see back in the front area there. The Mack House, right over here, you can't see it very well now, but it's now a veterinarian's office, but that was Asa Mack's house. He grew up in that house, and that's another example of craftsman-style architecture, steep roofs, shingle siding. That was our church. All these houses that we're seeing most likely had shingle sides. So Asa Mack lived there. In the flood of 1894, he was just a baby, and he had to be loaded into a boat and taken to higher ground. Anybody here in 1996 would remember how the water came up close to all that area. So those houses have gone through a lot of change over the years. Next, we see the Luster House on Sagart Street. Notice the steep roof. You can't see the steps there. Most of these houses had porches of that era. That was another distinguishing feature of craftsman-style homes. And today, how many porches do you see in new houses? I don't see very many. So that's another characteristic of craftsman style. We don't have a porch here, but we do have an awning out there a bit to keep the folks dry. They stand before they come in, and that's the closest we would have, perhaps, to a porch. So we'll move on to another one, the Byram House. Byram School, named after this family. This house doesn't look like this today, even though the framework is still there. And so the Byram family here, another donation land claim family whose ancestors date way back to the 1840s. And so another one that we have. Let's see what some others are. These are some others, but not as well built maybe or prominent in our history. But the craftsman style, again, Mr. Sherburne was involved in many of these, so he must have been a very busy guy in those days. Now, the reason we have a lot of this information is because people kept good records in those days, especially in the building of the church. There were secretaries who took minutes, not on a laptop, but by cursive. And one of our former members here, Duffy Hamilton, looked through all these records, and she wrote out a history in cursive that you can see on our website today under Church Stories, under our pictures section of our website, and find these stories. The story was here in this building that they hired an architect for $126 from Portland to come out and design the building. That meant he had to come out, take measurements of the land, get everything just right, lay it all out so that Mr. Sherbin and all the other volunteers could know where to start. And then he probably monitored it by coming out again, horse and buggy, before, well, maybe on the railroad by then, sure. But anyway, he would check on progress. And finally, when it was done, they had a fight in the church, believe it or not, argument about how much his bill was. Too high. So finally he agreed to knock $25 off, and they paid him $100 for that work. But anyway, it was a lot. Today it would require various lawyers to be involved to work out the contract or whatever. But anyway, that's the story that Duffy wrote out in this record of the building of this building. I remember seeing the records of what it cost for nails. Everything was well documented to get the right structure here. And the glass was different. And we do have some members today of our Methodist church up on the hill, the new one, who can remember how the building looked here in its form when you well used it. And I remember when we started coming in our family in 1972, the color of the glass back there was different, more like amber. Is that right, some of you? Amber colored glass, not clear or not opaque, but sort of amber colored. And I'm sure, if I recall, most of the glass is still original in those windows. But at any rate, again, quality materials were used throughout. So, in the building, it just stood over there, like I said, near the Euro shop. The fire station was next door then, which is one truck, and the city hall, which Yvonne worked in, was right there too, next to it, nearby, same lot. Today, you go over there, you'll see palm trees in pots or other things like that. It doesn't look anything like it then looked then, of course, but that building, the Euro shop, we'll see a photo of that later, was there, and that was a story in of itself. So we'll go ahead and see. Actually, the Sylvie family started a lumber yard right to the east of this building. And that was very important in this city for many years until the Clark family took it. So we are located then in the downtown of the way Tualatin was in those years, 1920s. And the families here used this church and the Grange Hall and the school as a place to gather for social events of all sorts. These places would be the go-to places for gatherings of all kinds. So, in this building in 1926, there were no inside facilities, no plumbing, no water. They had an outhouse in the back. So behind the building, if you needed to go today, you'd have to leave and come back in the rain, whatever. But in 1935, water finally came from a well nearby, and they were able to get plumbing in the building. Now, before that, though, they had a kitchen where the bathrooms are today. That was a kitchen. And so they could have events on that side of our building. From that wall there, the glass windows over, was all open. And that's where you could hold events. But pretty soon, they all decided that it was better if they could build a basement under the building. So have fellowship hall, events, more room. So that's what happened. We went ahead and built downstairs a large room, actually, as big as we see here, by digging it out. And that became an interesting story because this area over there was then a fairly high water table. And when heavy rains came, the water would come up. But they did have a concrete slab there under that area after they dug it out. They built a concrete slab, and then they built on top of that some boards to hold it up high and built a floor, a wood floor on top of that. And they had a sump pump that would keep that water pumped out. So in heavy rain periods like we do get here, the water would come up and they would have to keep that water out. And so one time, this is when I started coming with my family in the 70s, I remember going out with my family and picking walnuts up out on 65th from a farmer over there, and we went out and gathered walnuts. But with walnuts, when you just gather them like that, they're not ready to eat. They got to dry. So we brought them, and I said, I'm going to use the furnace room floor of the church to dry them, because it's always nice and warm in there. I had them all spread out on the floor. One week, we came to church the next week, and I looked in the furnace room, and everything was floating. All my walnuts. Now, this picture, you see, is an example of today's technology. Ross Baker created this with AI. He simply said, I want a picture of a basement. I want a picture of walnuts floating in water and a single light bulb. And that's what he got. So now you can see what AI today does for us. Well, it didn't look like that at all. I can just tell you that it was not like that. But I do know that the water did come. And that's another reason why today, when we moved it over here, we said no more basement. In fact, the city told us we couldn't have a basement because of other factors, but still. So we lost all that space. There was a lot of room down there. And in those days, this downstairs area was divided off with pipes and drapes so that you could have little classes of kids, Sunday school. And then finally later they built another building behind the church, which is no longer around, but it was a Sunday school building. The Sylvie family donated the land, it was built, and that worked very well. In fact, the new church for the Methodists up on Martinazzi had that building for a number of years, and that was used still later. But anyway, that was how it happened. The kids at that time, and that was Larry Lee as a teenager and others, dug it out, right, Lois? Dug out all that dirt under the building to build the basement. So another story that makes it fascinating to understand what happened in the growing years of this building. There also were several colors to this church. It was starting out dark brown. And then in the 70s, a man named Sam Coach, the Coach family, out here on the Sherwood Road, was involved then, and all that, those kids grew up here too. And he said, when it came time to paint the building, I remember he said, it's okay whatever color you paint it, but it's got to be green. And since he was known for being generous, that's what it became. Green church for a long time. And then after the Methodists left and another church came, it became tan colored like this. This was the color it became when we received it from the Tualatin Church of Christ. And so that's, again, an interesting progression, but now, because of people like Lois and others said, we need to go back to the original color, dark brown. And that's why we have that color today. Back to the 1926 look of the building. So, Now let's see, we're going to take a little tour of the building, thanks to Rick, who went around and did some filming. And we'll watch for some of the elements of the craftsman style architecture as we look at this building and walk around it. So you can begin to see the steep roof coming along, and the nice entryway, the 3 or 4 arched windows, which were then amber at one point. And then we're going to go upstairs. This is how the upstairs looks now. It's a work area for staff only. And you'll see why in a second. Because of those stairs, there's the stairway. Steep, narrow, and we're going to go down those steps all the way down. Very carefully go down, because there's not much width to the step itself, and finally out. And now we're downstairs here. And think of brown pews then, handmade brown pews. They worked very well. And again, from the outside, let's look, and I need to show you right now. Let's stop it here for a moment. Anyway, you see that window on the outside top of that wall you're looking at? That's the upstairs window right up there. Even in those days, they were concerned about safety. What would happen if there were a fire? So in those years, they developed a rope ladder that could be thrown out that window, and whoever was upstairs could get down somehow. I don't know how it worked, but maybe Chris would tell us stories next month about what they might have done, those kids, in those years when they knew that rope was there, what they could do with that ladder. So anyway, that was an interesting little side story about fire. And that's the reason, again, the city said, nope, you're not using the upstairs of that building. So a quick look, those doors are original to this building when it was built. Everything else you see, literally, except all the high-tech stuff, is new now. But still, in those days, we have Pastor Dan over here, who is the pastor of a church who now uses this building on Wednesdays and Sundays, right, Dan? And so he's still keeping the history alive of this building as a church. And again, and next month, we're going to share many stories like that of how the building was used. And last month, like I said, August, we'll talk about the move, an exciting story about how it was saved. Here we are at looking at the Euro shop today. Now, that doesn't look like the Euro shop today because they don't have that front area. So bottom left, you see the way it looks now, the Euro shop, the white building. And the hardware store and lumberyard is in the front section. That was the Clark lumberyard, earlier the Sylvie lumberyard. So then in 1960, the Methodists purchased a number of acres up on Martinezzi on the hill, knowing that someday they would outgrow this building. And that's what happened. In 1960, the Methodists left the building and moved up in their new building, and the building was vacant for a while until the Presbyterians, starting up a church here in Tualatin in the 70s, said, we need a space. So they leased the building for a while until they outgrew it. And it was eventually other uses. There was a man and woman team that used it as a consignment shop, clothing store for a while. And even the Tualatin Lions Club decided one year they needed a place for a haunted house. So they had different kinds of spirits in this building then. And I don't remember how long that lasted, but at least 1, if not 2 years in October, it became a haunted house. Until the Tualatin Church of Christ, in this case, Historical Society did not have it yet. We didn't have any authority over it, but the Clark Lumber people owned it all, and they released it to them. And they were here for maybe 10 years. I forget how long. And I wish we could find someone from that church that could come back and help us remember that part. But anyway, they came, and then one day in 2003, we received a letter at the Historical Society that said, "We're closing the building. We want to give it to you, the Historical Society." Now, at that time, I don't know how many members we had, maybe 100, I don't know. But I know we didn't have a very big budget, maybe 30,000. We didn't need it because we were meeting in the poll center. Had no building, only had records, photos, other kinds of documentary evidence of our history that we'd saved, and people put under their beds and in closets at home or whatever. And we had nowhere to go with a building. We didn't need it then. Well, now we had a building, and what are we going to do with it? Because they were ready to widen Boone's Ferry Road at that time. And they would have moved it right to the front steps, almost, of this building. So we knew we had to do something rather rapidly, and that's what you'll hear about in August. How did we go from there? So next month, May 6th, Memories of this Church. This is an example of what happened here. And in fact, we have the couple that in this picture, Jerry and Chris Tunstall, their wedding coming down the aisle right here. Still married later, too. Yep. So we're going to have a lot of fun remembering stories of the past in the May meeting. And that's why we need you to help us tell friends and others that you know who had anything to do here. Bring a picture, come that day, we'll take your picture, we'll borrow it, scan it, Ken will put it into our photo files that we have online, and we'll share stories, have a reunion of times past, including Pastor Dan's people today, because we've had a lot of things happening over the years in this building, especially since we took it over in 2006. We had our dedication of the building 20 years ago. So this is an anniversary of the Heritage Center, owned by the THS and the city, as well as the building itself. So keep those dates in mind. Stories in May, remembering the move in August. And there are many memories of programs in this building. Some were good, some maybe not. But there's one in particular that all of us who were there then will remember. It had to do with how Oregon was related to the Civil War. And we had this interesting speaker who came from Beaverton. I remember him well. And he had a rifle, a Civil War era rifle he held up. He held it up, and I'm going to stop the story there because I'm not going to tell you the rest. You have to come in May to know what happened after when he held up that rifle. It was memorable. So anyway, that's a teaser for May meeting. But in August, again, like I said, we're going to talk about the move. Paul is here, who at the time was the city Parks and Recreation manager and the library. But he was so involved with this building, how we got it to move, all the underpinnings. I mean, you wouldn't believe what Paul had to work with, because we're sitting on property that's owned by the city, yes, and they were willing to let the building come here. But that's the beginning of the story, because there must be 15 other agencies that had a role in how this would happen, including the fact that it's next to Sweek Pond, a wetlands. And there's other rules there about what can happen on this property and the runoff of water and other things that I can't even begin to tell you about. But you'll learn a little bit about it in August, because it was just not like a snap decision. Move a building, put it down. No. It started in 2005, really hard work. We raised the money first, 2004, 2005, we had agreements with the city, and that's just a teaser of what's to come on that date, August. So, there we have it. The move, August, all the way back till now, the beginning in 1926. So now, with the help of some of those who are here, let's see if you have questions or other comments to make about this building, especially its architecture, some of its features. These sliding glass doors here were very important. Again, when people were using this building for something like a funeral, the family could sit over here out of the sight of the others and could be out of the way. Or if you had a crying baby, the mother could go over here and sit and maybe not be in the direct line of everybody else. So this became a very functional space that the architect had in mind after designing it. The way you got downstairs to the basement, you came in the front door, and where that closet is directly, there's stairway down and a landing and then another stair, just about the same size as those stairs going up. Anyway, that was how people got into the basement through the front door down. So, anything more to add? Lois, anything? Any more? Chris?
I want to recognize that you, Larry McClure, and Mark Parker went to the Commons when we had all the concerts there, and walked around and collected signatures. And I think there were 1,200 signatures collected by all of us working on it, but these two specifically are really key territory.
That's
Thank
right.
you, Lord.
That's what we were told, that the city council, the mayor then was Lou Ogden, and Paul and others said, you're going to have to show us public interest, because that requires a big investment of money. City, and what we raised was $180,000. That's the THS. That's a lot of money in 2005, 4, and so we did it, and we're proud of what happened. There are some people who are not here today. When I see Ken sitting here with that cap, my image goes back to Jack Broom, who was one of our members, who was an architect, retired, living in the Sweek House. He was vital in the saving of the building, how to make it happen, because he knew enough about how to deal with building permits and codes and how to get the message out about how to draw it up and all of that. But Ken, that hat, that cap, Jack Broom's cap. And so there were a lot of folks. There's another well-known fellow that we used to laugh with so much, but his name was Bill Gillum. And he was another codger. And there were just a lot of old timers that knew this building, from the community too, that wanted to see it saved. It was sort of an image. I know the Hervin Company, Blue Mountain Dog Food, everybody knew that as an icon of the city, or the Sweetbriar Inn across the freeway. But the church was a very important function, icon of the town, and it was the one that lasted. This was the only church. There was one on Norwood, right, Lois, Norwood? But that was I don't know if they ever considered that Tualatin or not, Norwood, but we were the church that people identified as Tualatin. April.
Larry, in your research, did you find any other churches built
By this architect or carpenters? Is this the only one that looks like this?
I think so, but I did not research, and I don't know. We don't have the record of who the architect was. We just know that he had this argument about fee. So, yeah.
I've got a question, Larry. What was the name of the movers? Was that Emmer that moved the building?
No, it was called, what was it called? I'll think of it before we're done here.
I just wanted to mention that Jack Broom was a key person to help locate the Meridian Park Hospital, and I met him through that association. Then I found out nobody understood what a downtown organization was to build it up. Urban renewal is what it was called. So I put all of the members on a bus and took them to Salem to show them what an urban renewal area looked like. I did not understand that Jack Broom and Mrs. Sweek, Althea Pratt, were sitting on the bus together and later got married.
Yep.
And so he also was a key person to relocate this building.
And in fact, urban renewal was part of the story you'll hear in August. And the name of the company was Northwest Structural Moving. So it was Scappoose, I think it is, St. Helens Scappoose. And they're the ones who moved the old brick store where the teriyaki and the VFW is. They said, oh, no problem. It's brick. Huge building. I mean, it's 2 stories, but it's big. And the bricks are fragile because they're made right here in Tualatin, 1913 era. But they built a iron structure inside the building to hold it up and moved it 30 feet. And so, I mean, that's another example of how moving buildings can be done. But we didn't get but one small crack came later along right here on this wall. As the building settled over the years, we noticed a small little crack, hardly noticeable. But because it was so well built, I believe, again, another reason that craftsman style architecture was so good. It was built well with good lumber.
Is the beadboard part of the craftsman style? Because I remember sitting in this church looking at that, and consequently we used it in our house and also at our family beach house. I really like the look, the ceiling, the beadboard on the ceiling.
Okay, I think you're right.
About the basement. So I'm not really remembering much about the basement come around 2005. I do remember crawling under the building after it was propped up, getting ready to be moved. But the soil in my mind, and probably I've got some photos, was only about 6 feet. So all the basement you're talking about must have come and then later gone. Do you know anything about that?
No, but I just know you could stand up just fine down there. It was just like a regular room.
Well, maybe there was more space than I remember. You're under a building on a
But
few beams.
remember, it was sitting up a little bit higher on a foundation because there were
there
6
you go.
steps to come
There
up
you
into
go.
the building. So it was higher that way. But yeah, it was that way, and it held together in the move.
My thoughts keep going back to the very brief mention that you made of I can't remember who owned the building and donated it. Which church was that?
Tualatin Church of Christ.
Church of Christ, okay.
Yep.
The forethought that they had in now knowing where you met, in the Pole Center, I didn't know what part you took in the city before you became such a big important organization here, but that they had the thought to offer it to you folks meeting over there, and I just wonder what was behind it.
I wish I knew that too. And I wish there were a member of that church who could help us with that part of the history, because it's important to know. Actually, it was owned by the Clark Lumber Company. They didn't care who was using it. They rented it out. But still, it was the church that said, Clark Lumber owned the land under it, but they said, you can have the building too. We don't want it. They're going to widen the road. It's got to go or be torn down. So that was the incentive. Yep.
Vince, let's see. Oh, come on, Lois. Vic Hannigan told me that the church had these iron railings on the outside by the steps. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And he made those. There was a blacksmith shop right across from Hannigan Station, and he made those bars himself.
Wow. Yep. Like I said, this wouldn't have come together without volunteers. I mean, it takes a pretty good craftsman to build a pulpit like that, or whatever, or pew. It's just not any run-of-the-mill hobbyist. So, a lot of talented folks. Anything else? Well, I just want to thank you all for coming, and I want April, again, to come up and share maybe about next month. But April Wicker, our Vice President.
Let's thank Larry
Thank you, Larry, for all the research that you did in putting all of this together. This was really a good program, and I appreciate everyone coming to enjoy it and participate. Thank you very much. As Larry was saying, next month we're going to talk about some of the stories of people and memories that happened in this building. And are we going to talk about haunted spirits?
To see.
That might be part of it too. So I would love to see all of you back again on May 6th. And we'll talk some more about this church and its provenance. And then in June, we have 4th grade history day, so there won't be a program in June. And then we'll start on the summer. Thank you again for coming. I appreciate seeing every one of you. And thanks again, Larry. Really appreciate it.